this name?
Elton Butcher.
Okay, and
Elton.
and where was your farm? Let's say
At Pathara, which
Okay.
is in the Dalwallinu Shire district,
Mm-hmm.
in what we call the wheat belt.
Okay. It's just actually would be just below the Midwest area, I suppose.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The northeastern wheat belt.
Okay. I'm not trying to be too formal.
No.
It's going to come out that way. But it's maybe not. We'll see. Like I said, this is my
Yeah.
first attempt at this. Let's start with concentrate on your history and the family history.
Well, my history is basically I was born to a pioneer farmer.
Oh, great.
Farming family, and I've run my stint. My eldest son is now the manager of the farming business, and we still retain the name of my father in the business. It's a family farm.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested to know, where you said the pioneer family. What year did your family
my
arrive
father went
there?
there in. I've got something that might interest you.
Mm-hmm.
I've just finished a book.
Ah, yeah, you wrote to me about this.
And you may take that as a gift.
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful.
Which will tell you all about pioneer farming up until my age of about 12, that book. It's one of 3.
Mm-hmm.
The second one's due to go to print soon. The third one's half written, so
It's wonderful.
contents there might just run
Okay.
your eye over that. You'll see a bit more about what's in there.
Okay. Well, just give us, because for the sake of the conversation, what year, say, about...
So my father went there in 1914. He originally arrived from England in December 1910.
Uh-huh.
He found work in the country
Mm-hmm.
thereafter, and he took up his first block in 1914 west of Pathara, but he was what we call a pommy migrant. You heard the term pommy, so
Of course.
pommy migrant, and he knew little about land, and he selected it off the litho, as they used to say. And he soon realised it was a poor block, and he moved to South Dalwallinu.
Mm-hmm.
He married, and unfortunately his wife died when he had 2 young children. And then he, after a period of time, he settled back to Pathara, where we farm from today.
That was like reselling and selling, or...
Well, the first block he walked off, as they say, gave that away and started again.
How did that, I mean, from the little reading I managed to do before I came, there's terms like leasing, which seems to be more like the far north or further south in the 1800s.
This is agricultural area.
Mm-hmm. Like the government's opening it up?
Well, the government was opening up the land, and it was what we call crown purchase in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You purchase it from the crown,
mm-hmm.
or the government,
yeah,
and you paid paid for the money over a period of time, and there was several schemes that involved, and then the land became freehold when you'd met all the obligations.
Mm-hmm.
And once it became freehold, well, you could sell it to anybody.
And when you talk, say like the original farm or farms, they large tracts of land?
No, basically in this district that we're talking about, they were 1,000-acre blocks.
Mm-hmm.
The blocks would have, I could show you, this is an old litho.
Mm-hmm.
you're getting down to some basics before we start, but I'm
Background.
interested to show you. This is the Pathara town site, and that was the block he first took up, which is not
Bit
very
west.
far. Yeah, west.
What's this, a railway?
That's the railway. This is the first litho that had the railway on it. There was, when he came up, the railway was under construction through here, and there were very few people around at that stage.
And Dawalini was was already existing.
No different to Pathara, it was just a spot on the map. And I'm looking to see where that block is. There it is.
That's the second one.
That's the second block that he purchased that, and then his wife died there, and he left that, sold it, and came to 1918. So these blocks they had 160 acres, what they called a homestead block, which was a Crown grant if you fulfilled all the obligations, and attached to that was usually the balance of 1,000 acres. Now they weren't exactly 1,000 always, but they were in that vicinity because there were roads and lakes and railways.
And that's the original leasehold?
That's the one he got at the time.
When he got the titles or something?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. And
so that's the size of the blocks, and
well, there's two immediate questions which pop into my mind.
yeah.
One is, it was all bush and had to clear it?
It's just all bush.
What sort of bush? Like
well, varied, but of course the land types vary, and he.
So the first one was probably sand or something?
It was sandy, low scrub, easy to clear, but no results when you did. It's different today because farming has altered. It's a different world.
Yeah. I suppose all the phosphates and stuff like that.
The phosphate and the copper and the zinc and all the trace elements that were needed.
It's quite amazing that in a relatively small space, the land quality varied so much.
Literally from here to the door, and there'll be a change.
Yeah.
Because this is the oldest landscape in the world, this piece of land in the southwest corner. And if a big mountain was there or a great big boulder was there, and that's dissolved down over the millions of years, you can step from there to there and be on different soil type. So yeah.
So when you get good land, it's good land compared to Europe or the States, or
no, it's the oldest worn out land in the world.
So yeah, you get red patches.
Yeah, well, the red land was mainly where the trees grew in that wheat belt, and that was a better type of soil. And
you have any idea, like, when it was not just scrubland, when it was trees, do you have any idea what sort of forest was there? Like, was it jarrah or?
No, up in that area they were what we call, the red land was, I can't give you the botanical names, I've forgotten them, but
roughly.
Salmon gum and gimlet trees.
Okay.
Bearing down to the scrubs. I mean, there's 12,000 varieties of flora in the southwest corner. So.
And when your dad came, well, obviously couldn't have been a returned soldier at that, I presume.
No, that's 1914.
Yeah. So, did he come on some sort of scheme?
No, just selected the block and.
But why did he come to Australia?
Oh, he came to Australia because any place was better
Than Europe.
than England.
And where did he come from in England?
Suffolk,
Suffolk.
in the east.
East.
Actually, you might. These questions will be answered when you read that book.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, okay. And what year were you born in?
27 I was born.
Oh, that's rather like my dad. Okay. And you were born on the farm, or?
Well, I was actually born in Perth, but I lived all my life on the farm.
On the farm. But so your mum came down. Your mum was your dad's second wife.
Yes, yes.
So you had half brothers at all, or?
Yeah, I had two half brothers.
Hmm.
And, they were sort of 10 years older than me, and that put them in a different. Things change a lot every 10 years.
And was your mother Australian, or she also English?
She was Australian. She was born in Kalgoorlie.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Her mother was the third white woman in Kalgoorlie. And yes, she was Australian. Her mother was Australian too, so they came from the Victorian goldfields.
Yeah, British, I like that. There was the guy that wrote his biography about 20 years ago, and they made it into a series of films. And, I've forgotten his name now. I have the book at home.
Facey?
Probably, Albert Facey. He also was
Unfortunate
born not far
life.
from not far from the Kalgoorlie.
No, he was, I can't remember where he was born, but he lived around Narrogin and Pingelly Way.
He moved a bit. Anyway, it's not really
Yeah.
important. And so you were born in Perth, but you grew up on the farm.
I had a younger sister.
As well.
So we grew up there.
And where did you go for school? Schooling?
I went primary school in Thara, and then went to boarding school.
Down here?
Wesley.
Wesley, yeah. So it's already around.
Yeah.
Okay. And Pithara. So it was, and when you were already a small kid, did they already have electricity?
Oh no, we didn't get power in the district until we got water in 68 and power in 73, I think it was, or 4.
So what did you do for power? You had those big batteries?
Oh yes, we had, before we got the SEC or the grid power, we had electric power for a few years on 32 volt batteries and diesel generator.
And that would be, say, also from your father's, when he started, he had nothing?
Nothing. When he started, he had, well, I'll tell you, when he started, he went to Mr. Baird. Now, do you remember Baird's, the company that was opposite the railway station in Perth? Hardware.
There used to be Moores and Baird's. And
yeah, well, Baird's were there. Well, if you take yourself back then to 1912 or 13, Dad borrowed from Mr. Baird. He went in with a few pound, and he cleared land at Bruce Rock, near there, on a contract, and he paid back Mr. Baird his £5, and he always swore by Mr. Baird. And then when he wanted to go to Pithara, he went in with £10 he'd saved, and he got another £10 credit. And that's what he started his farming life with.
So yeah, sort of. And how many acres did £10?
Well, he could take up a block, you see, and work it off.
Down payment.
Yeah.
Yes. And they would have used horses, and Did he know what he was going into straight away? Like,
Oh yes,
was wheat straight away?
No, that was the objective. Yes.
That was the objective. Yeah. And from what my dad told me, really the area is more wheat, and the sheep were a sideline.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's wheat was the main.
Wheat,
was the main.
Yeah, grain production even right to this day.
And it would have been different then, before they developed all sorts of strains that were sort of adapted to the local conditions.
Yeah,
It would have been tough.
Totally different. I really tried to put into that book what it was like, but I don't think anybody can really visualise it.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
It's never the same.
No.
Life's very different today than, the Australia you live so well. Yeah.
It is just so different from year to year. Australia's just on a huge bubble that I hope doesn't burst, but it could. And of course that's really where my connection with the wool buyers started back in the Depression.
Okay, yeah,
when John Shiner, who you must have found out a bit about by now.
Very little.
He came into our lives by driving through the front gate with an old ute with some vegetables and fruit on board, and he first dealt with my mother, and if she was satisfied with what she bought from him, he came back next month, and so the business started. And I'm only a lad, and he was a thorough gentleman, and he'd say, "Here, have an apple, son," and I remember an apple. I never eat an apple, but I think of, because apples were pretty scarce in those conditions in those days in the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started buying wool, and then the business sort of grew within the family and with him.
And would you, like you said, in the 30s, would you be able to pinpoint a bit more? Where early 30s, middle 30s?
I think he came about 1936 or 7.
Okay, a bit before the war.
Yeah.
And were there other, I don't know, let's call them, for want of a better word, itinerant buyers,
no,
sellers, whatever?
No, they seem to appear from nowhere. They were all Jews, you know, and I don't use that term in a derogatory manner or but it put them apart. They landed in an Anglo-Saxon place.
Very, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a multicultural society then, although it was multicultural to the fact that we had just about everybody represented in Australia, but the Anglo-Saxons were the dominant feature.
Especially before the war.
Before the war, yeah.
Mm.
So that's in book 2, actually, that little story.
And do you remember other people like him?
Yeah, well, there were 1 or 2 around, but I can't really, you know, your father was, when he came into the picture, I don't remember.
It would have been in the 50s.
Yeah, much later. Now, I was thinking through my brain last night, and about the middle of the night fluttered a name that I don't think I mentioned in there, a chap by the name of Les Zussman.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned Paul Levitt. Do you know him at all?
I also went
the family?
I think I went to school I discovered the other day with John Shiner's
Son?
grandson,
Oh yeah, grandson.
from the mother's side, from kindergarten till
Yeah.
the end of high school to their matriculation, and the Paul Levitt's grandson will also be a similar. I went right through kindergarten through part of high school with him, or up till high school. So I'm still in contact with both of them. Yeah.
So, and I can recall Les Zussman telling me that he and John Shiner, I think it was, were had work in Darren, which, do you know where Darren is?
I don't remember.
I better get this map out
vaguely
to show
familiar.
you, because I keep using these names and you.
I'll find them. I'll work them out as we go along, over the next few weeks.
Oh well, you'll have to record me. Where are we? Here's Perth. And we're up
Further
up
north,
there. Northam, Gamelling, Darren there.
Okay, yeah.
They walk it's 25k from Darren to Gamelling, and he was saying how it's just vaguely in my memory, is how they got a couple of pounds of butter to take to Perth, and it was a hot day and they were walking, and they had it wrapped in newspaper, and when they started off in the morning that was all right, but gradually as the day went on, the butter melted, and there was their butter for the family in Perth on the road somewhere. So that was an indication of the times. I mean, I could talk about the Depression for a long time, because I remember a lot about it, and I saw the results of it. And
well, I'd be interested to hear some incidents.
Well, things were tough, and it was real, and I don't think anybody today can imagine 30 or 40% unemployed, and as my father said, it'll never happen again, son, because the modern people wouldn't stand for it. It would be a revolution, and I don't think it will. I think we've advanced past that. We'd find a way out of it.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, anyway.
So, and how you were a boy then in those?
Yeah.
So how? What's it's like from 1930 to the war?
Well, the Depression really didn't hit our district hard until 1931-32, when the collapse in the wheat prices. The wheat price dropped from about 4 and 6pence a bushel to 1 and 6pence. And whilst it wasn't at 1 and 6pence for a long time, the banks forced everybody to sell at that price, and that meant that you carried that debt for years and years. We didn't get rid of the debt till 1954.
What do you mean by selling? So I mean your land or something else?
You'd produced your crop. It was a good year. The crops were in the silo, and it was all private buying in those days. And the bank, the farmers were saying, "I'm not going to sell it at that price."
Okay.
And the bank say, "Oh yes, you are."
Because I presume that, like the mortgage on the land. Yeah.
The banks own the country. Don't worry, they still own it. They own it better, and with the drought we're in at the present time, you've never seen debt like it is at the present time.
Reminds me of the story of Joseph in Egypt. They also they bought everything off the farmers. In the end, they bought the land as well.
Yeah.
Gave it to went on to the name of the pharaoh.
Yeah.
With the drought.
Well, the one thing about it, human beings have never changed. They are still the same ones.
But when in 31 or 32 you were a very little boy.
Oh yeah, well I was a little boy, but you see, I had to live with the depression, and whilst I was very lucky, I never went hungry, but I went to school and there were people digging a dam, a railway dam nearby, and it was all pick and shovel jobs, and these families were living in tents in the cold, wet, freezing weather, and it gets cold when it's 0 and -1 or 2 at night, and you're in a tent with your family, and the government very generously paid them. I have heard the figure, but I'm not going to quote it today because I might be wrong, but a few shillings a week to keep their families, but they had to stop at work continuously, and if they, but the work would cut out every second week. So they really, to get onto the dole and to stop on the dole, they had to make their 1 week's dole money last 2 weeks. Otherwise, if they did anything else, or then you couldn't get it again for 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Now I saw those kids come to school, and kids were tough in those days. They came in a shirt and a shorts, and bare feet, and they say it's not cold. I thought it was cold, you know. It was cold for me, and I had a jumper on. Then when it came to lunchtime, they unwrapped newspaper, and there was this hard-looking stuff about the size of that plate, and about that thick, which of course I now know is damper. But I had a sandwich with butter and jam on it. That was the difference.
So you saw the difference rather than went without on your own.
Because of my parents, they suffered. No different to what's going to happen if we have a burst in the bubble now with people with their house taken away from them and all this sort of thing.
Well, it's a very different period, but in some respect, did you ask for things and your parents say no, we can't afford it?
Oh yeah, that's right. You just got used to it, you know. My wife, she was, well, it's my partner really, Jean, but she was in England, and as we try to tell the kids today, we've got grandchildren and so on, we're a big family between the two of us. Christmas stocking was just literally a small container with 2 or 3 items in it, and that was Christmas. Different, so different. No, I don't want to see it back.
What did you have? Obviously, there was no TV because it didn't come for another 20 years.
Well, we got
had radio.
We got the radio about 1938 or 9, I think, and it was it depended on the batteries, and in those days the radios were mainly run on one 6-volt battery, the old, like a car battery, and 2 sets of dry batteries. And aerial was right out, hanging on a tree way over, and you had an earth that had to be looked after. And
how did it feel like? It's not really the outback, right?
No.
Where you guys? Did you feel like you were in the outback?
Oh yeah. We didn't travel because you only had, we were lucky we were in the generation of motor cars. But petrol costs money, tyres cost money, cars cost money.
The roads,
and the roads were tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's.
But you had a local school. You had, I think that I gather the railway would have been very important.
Oh, the railway was the lifeblood. That's what opened the country up.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of wise leaders. Sir James Mitchell was probably the most outstanding, and he took the railways where other people hesitated. So the railway system crisscrossed the state. Just everywhere had rail, basically.
Because just going back more to your father and that part, I read that, like in the Karoo area, there have been people pioneering maybe leasing and pastures, maybe with livestock, maybe in the late 1880s.
Oh, Karoo, yeah. Yes.
And you're in Dulwell and you're in South.
No,
there wasn't anything like that.
See, the difference was at Karoo they had water. In our area, water was the big problem. If it's better on this map just to see that. If I can. No, I've got to think which is the map. There's Karoo, Carnamo, Three Springs. We're over here. When you approach Pathara, see where these roads join here?
Yeah.
There's a star there, that's about where there was a well. And if that well wasn't at the right level and adequate water in it, the advice was don't move any further because this is an area with very little water, natural water.
That's an artesian bore?
No, it was just a well about 30 or 40 feet deep, and it made very little water. I mean...
That would be like for drinking, water for drinking and bathing?
For drinking. Yeah, bathing was a matter of... that's a luxury you had when
Christmas.
It rained.
And all the agriculture was totally dependent on natural conditions, on natural rainfall and
saving the water that fell and
a bit of dams or something.
Digging wells.
Okay. Anyway, so and the other families around you, did you have much? When you were a child, maybe even a teenager, did you have? Well, obviously you would have met at school, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that was really the thing that kids in those days all had their chores to do, and you got to school. I went on a push bike. Other families had a horse and sulky or rode a horse and push bikes. That was the way we got to school.
And were other kids your age? You said like predominantly Anglo-Saxon. Well, most of did you feel was that like typical to have an English father, or you first generation yourself, as they say? Yeah. Were the other kids also first?
To
be first generation?
Much the same. There were a lot of returned soldiers in the district by the time I came along. In Dad's case, he wasn't, but
they would also be English soldiers, ex-servicemen.
No, they were ex-servicemen, English, of course, as well as Australians.
I think I'd read about.
But the Australians were the ones that got the bit of help that was around.
Okay. And so you were just when you were at school, you were just one of the typical kids. Okay. And so one of the obvious questions. How did you see like guys like Mr. Shiner and the other guys?
Yeah, well, I had. I think I was very lucky. I was My father was probably particular in his friends, and so therefore I got the benefit of some particularly good advice from people that were close. And I've nominated them in these books and written about them because they were, the kids were, these families are so isolated that you either were lucky or unlucky. I mean, you could have had a drunken slob next door to you, and of course that was one of the things I saw a lot of. We had a lot of men working for us over the times, and a lot of the return men took to the booze, and I couldn't stand that in my young days, and Dad used to say, you've got to keep an open mind on these things. And of course until I was about 25 my mind wasn't open. I saw a lot of men that I couldn't stand, but when I look back on what they'd gone through, or possibly what they went through, I've written a fair bit about my uncles, because 3 of them went to the three on Dad's side and 1 on Mum's side, were involved in the war. And you grow a little wiser and you get older. Hopefully.
Well, did you go through the army yourself?
No, I was lucky because by the time I was 18, I was manpowered, and
yeah, that's lucky.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's touching on an interesting point. Most of the outside of school, but on the farm, around the home, most outside of your parents, most of the people around you would have been workers.
Yeah, single men, mainly.
Of Australian background.
Yeah.
Aboriginal, but
no Aboriginals in that area. There is traces I've found some grinding stones and that sort of thing over the years, but I think it's the last chapter in that book is a mention of the Aborigines. Yeah, just open it up for the last.
Because Dalwallinu, if I think I read, was named was possibly something to do with local Aborigines in the area.
Oh, look.
That's a bit north, maybe.
These days, everything is Aboriginal.
Sure. Okay.
It's we've got to think that way, and we've talked into it. But in fact, there were no Aborigines in the area, according to my father.
Fair enough.
And the basic reason would have been water shortage. They might have passed through the district, but they wouldn't have stopped long because it's a very dry area.
Yeah.
Well, not so much dry, it's so difficult to find water.
Anyway, the main thrust of the question was if they were part of the workforce. No, okay. So they could be a pretty rough lot, these workers, I gather.
Oh yes, a lot of booze and that sort of thing.
They had little separate quarters from.
They had separate quarters, or Mum looked after them usually. Dad used to sort them out pretty well.
What sort of? I mean, because when I went up, already I'm talking about the late 60s and early 70s. So, and my impression was you had maybe a few helpers, guys that were groused and maybe help fencing and
shearing
stuff. Shearers obviously came. Yeah. There was a separate profession.
Yeah, well, they usually lived in the area and.
They were local more in those days.
Yeah, in those days.
And do you have any ideas? Say, well, by the time you were farming, how many what sort of clip were you producing?
Oh, we used to run, when I first started, 400 to 500 sheep, and got up to a couple of thousand in the 60s. Now the farms have all got bigger, of course, now.
Mm-hmm. How many acres were you running then?
Well, the 56 in 56 we bought a farm next door of 1,500 acres on top of the 1,700, and so it's gone on.
Yeah, then you're getting close to 4 in those.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I imagine it was mainly wheat, and then.
It's wheat with sheep.
Mm-hmm. There's the name, another name of a wool buyer that I knew, maybe around the same time as Shiner, and maybe a bit later. Sam Wendy, does that ring a bell?
Wendy, yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew him a little bit.
Yeah.
His son, who is also retired already.
Yeah.
He lives in Israel also, and it's part of the grandkids, part of them in Australia. And also, I know they have a few branches in the family.
Yeah.
Does that sort of stir any memories, or he didn't come around to your
No, I
place?
can just remember the name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, I suppose in our case, everybody knew that John Shiner was the bloke, and they didn't try to undercut him or come in.
Be. Yeah, I have to speak with them and see, with a few surviving woolbuyers already of my father's generation, and see.
See, he was.
Sometimes I know that my dad had. Sometimes there were overlapping of regions, and he'd be competing with.
Well, I imagine that my father would have said, "Well, you're wasting your time driving up the gateway," and I would have said the same. So, in this particular matter.
Well, by the time, say, unfortunately, I still haven't understood how the business works. You know, the wool buying business. But I'll get around. Hopefully, by the end of the next few weeks, I will. But I mean, what I remember as a kid, there was a wool buyer had. If you didn't have competition from a fellow wool buyer competing, you were competing, or they were competing against one of the big, Dalghettis or Elders and those,
yeah.
or sending the wool straight down to the floor.
Well, the situation was this, if I could sum it up. You had in those days there were more agents, there's only 2 today basically. There was Dalghettis, West Farmers,
yeah,
Elders, Goldsborough Mort.
Yeah.
That was about it. They were auction houses. They didn't buy the wool. They took it in and sold it, weighed it.
So that's what they call sending it to the floor?
To the floor, yeah.
So that's Dalghettis? Or all of them?
All of them. That's all they did. And they've always been, they've amalgamated now.
Yeah.
GM went with Elders, and Dalghettis took over West Farmers, and West Farmers took over Dalghettis in the eastern states. And Dalghettis were bought out by another group here, but basically they're the 4 names of the time, and you've only got the 2 now. There are others have come in, but they're the 2 old ones. But that went to the floor, it was auctioned, and you got the price, whatever it was.
Whenever.
And of course, one of the other things was they financed a lot of farmers as well.
That's what I think. Like for the wool buyers, that was possible sort of source of competition. Because
well, it was a source of competition
all the
because what would happen is that these blokes, the wool buyers would come along with a pocket full of cash or cheque, but they'd say, well, we'll take your oddments. And they get cash for it, and West farmers or elders didn't get their fingers on it, you see. So there was all that going on all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where the wool buyer, the private wool buyers, started and gradually took over whole clips. But you see, John Shiner used to sell to Rex Robertson and Company.
My dad started with that. I don't know, started when I was a kid. He used to work with them. Yeah,
Yeah, well, Johnny used to sell to them, or whether he actually physically sold or used them as agents or what. Once it went off the farm, you didn't know what happened to it. But Rex Robertson used to take a lot of his wool. And then, of course, when the war came, the joint organisation took over, and that was the British government and the Australian government took all the wool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happened then was they said the price of wool in Australia will average 13 pence. That's for all the 3,300 odd types of wool, and varying amounts that would come in at varying times, and at the end of the year be still variable. Everything was variable. It will average 13 pence.
Mm-hmm.
So the wool was sent. So in those days, the farmer would sell to the local wool buyer, and that wool would become his property, and he'd have it appraised and sold under his name.
The wool buyer.
The wool buyer.
I should talk about the war then.
Eh?
You talk about the war period.
Yes, this is the period of the war and the joint organisation. And it had to average 13 pence. So, I'm not saying people were dishonest, I'm saying there was a lot of funny business happening in Fremantle. But that's the way it was. Now, if you sold it to John Shiner, we'll say, and he took it down, it was appraised in the system, when after the war they had a lot of wool left over, and the wool prices went up, and they made a lot of money. The joint organisation made a lot of money around the world on it. They paid dividends on that wool.
To the farmers?
To the owner.
Yeah.
Of the wool.
To the owner of the wool.
Now, what used to happen, of course, was the wool buyers were buying from the farmer and getting wool that West farmers and elders had their fingers on, or thought they did, but also the banks. Now, my father was scrupulously honest, and he owed the banks money. They got every penny. That was
due.
That was the way it was. So when he sold his wool to John Shiner, he sold it for a cheque, not cash. A cheque. The cheque went to the bank, and everything was recorded, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And when the joint organisation made a lot of money at the end of the war, the dividends came back
to the bank,
or to the owner, and that enabled us to pay more off the bank. But it came back through the system in real money as real dividends. But for the man,
actually, it came out as through the pipeline to the farmer.
Yes,
that surprises me.
Yeah, because that wool had to be identified if it was sold for a cheque.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was sold for cash, it obviously belonged to the bloke who'd bought it.
So your dad's scrupulous
So
standards paid off.
it did.
Oh, that's cool.
But the bloke who sold for cash, his money ended up going to the
Elders or the wool buyer?
to the wool buyer. Well, I mean, I haven't got any direct proof of who and what, but that's what happened.
Yeah. So obviously, if it had been one of the big 3 or 4 big companies, that obviously wouldn't have been for cash.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Cash was cash.
That's interesting.
Now, in that paper, I've mentioned 3 or 4 names of people who dealt with John Shiner, and there are of course many others, but the ones I've mentioned are people I know, and I knew what went on.
Mm-hmm.
And one is Jim Sawyer, who's long dead, but his son is a particular friend of mine. And one is Jim Sawyer, and Jim Sawyer was as honest as John Shiner. And John Shiner used to bring up large amounts of money. I find it hard to, 10,000 was a lot of money in those days. And he reckoned it was safer with Jim Sawyer than at the bank. And he used to call into Jim Sawyer's farm, leave him a container with a lot of money in, and then travel around the district and buy with cash. And when he got low, he went back to Jim's, and they got the money out again. And
were there? And I think my father at some point in the early days also used to walk around with rolls of cash, and I never thought about it till this last few weeks when someone wrote how amazing was they'd walk around, they'd be traveling around the region with these great lumps of money. I mean, who was going to attack them? All these anybody? Was it dangerous, you reckon?
I don't think it was dangerous at all. According to John Shiner, it was safer to...
No, with John Sawyer. Oh, what's his name?
Jim Sawyer.
Jim Sawyer. But wandering around from farm to farm, do you think they were in danger?
No. People were different in those days.
It may be somewhat drunk.
Completely different society. Yeah.
I'm going to run out of time here as well.
Completely different society.
Oh my God, okay. I'll change this film in a few minutes. Anyway, okay,
Yeah.
so, because my dad told me from a different era that I think probably when it was, if you talk about dealing with oddments and buying oddments, it was a bit of money that under the table and sort of help out with the tax and a little bit of holiday money and Christmas and stuff like that.
That was the other thing. That brought a lot of people into trouble with the tax. This dealing in cash became more obvious when it was traceable through the joint organisation, and the money had to go somewhere, you see. And if your father hadn't paid tax on it, he didn't want the money. And if the farmer hadn't paid tax, he didn't want the money, or he might have wanted the money, but he took a risk taking it. And the tax department caught up with a lot through that system.
So that's in the immediate post-war?
Yeah.
So that could have...
Because according to my father, who didn't pay tax until he had to, tax was a sort of a non-event before the war.
Mm-hmm.
It was all state tax then, and during the war the states gave over the taxing powers to the Commonwealth government, which they still hold to this day, on income tax and that sort of thing. And tax was a non-event until...
You mean they didn't enforce it? Is it, you mean, or incomes
weren't
high enough?
They either didn't enforce it, or it didn't come in until you made a lot of money, and most of these people never made any money anyway.
In those days. Anyway, when you said that after the war with this joint business, and then they started tracing money, that them might earmarked these Jewish wool buyers, giving them a bad name.
Well, it might have, might have done that, but the thing was that we were receiving joint organisation dividends when a lot of others who'd sold for cash weren't. So,
Yeah.
They were
Didn't affect you, in other words.
Society, yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's fairly limited to what I know about the private wool buyers, because in 1959, I was the secretary of an organisation we formed the West Australian Wool Growers Cooperative, and we were taking in wool. We were trying to set up a system of selling direct to the manufacturers and get rid of this long pipeline that still exists to this day,
Mm-hmm.
of everybody getting a slice of the action. And so I dealt with WAVCOP, as we called it, WA Wool Growers Voluntary Cooperative, and I dealt with him for 25 years, I think. So my association with the wool buyers after a certain time just disappeared.
Okay. We'll see if you have the knowledge or not, or not. Information you said, like basically they started buying may have started like Johnny Shiner's with vegetables and stuff, gone into probably into oddments. Do you know how sort of it developed into buying the whole clips?
Once the joint organisation finished in 1946 or 8, I forget now, back in those times, once the joint organisation finished, the whole thing was thrown open to the old system returned entirely,
mm-hmm.
Of auctions, and but it didn't mean to say you had to sell through the old system. That's when the wool buyers started to represent bigger companies like Rex Robertson,
mm-hmm.
who would have their people wandering around the country buying privately.
Yeah.
And what they did was they bought, sometimes they bought on the sheep's back, as they call it.
Yeah.
We'll take all the wool off there for...
Before it's even shorn, in other words.
Before it's shorn.
Yeah.
For whatever.
Yeah.
Or they looked at the wool as it was being shorn, and they worked on previous records.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, last year he cut a certain type of wool. He's been on the same rams for years, and so on. We'll come back again. And
go on, don't let me interrupt you.
No. So they, that's the way they bought the wool. And they were, in West Australia, it was quite unique in Australia, in as much as they got up to 25% at one stage on private buying.
On private buying, yeah.
Yes. Whereas in the eastern states, and I don't think it ever went over 10% of private buying. Now, the difference, of course, is that West Australian farmers are a different breed to what they are over there.
Uh-huh.
That's quite noticeable when you've been associated with various things that I've been involved with over the years, such as particularly the farmer organisations, and I was chairman of the State Soil and Land Conservation Council for 11 years,
mm-hmm.
and travelled in the east a lot, and the farmers are quite different over there. I think they had to struggle more in West Australia, and that bred a different line. You're either successful or you're out.
That's interesting. Now I'm going to try and stop the thing because I've got a feeling it's running out of that.